Do you want to bury former Vols on other teams? And the answers are yes, disloyalty should be punished, or no, wish the best for athletes.
Okay, well, I want to get your thoughts on that. 4 Downs brought to you by Banks & Jones. Right now, like and subscribe. Off the Hook Sports.
4 Downs. 4 questions. 4 answers. The Dave Hooker Show. 4 Downs. A presentation of offthehooksports.com.
Okay, Caleb, here we go. Do you want to bury former Vols that are playing on other teams? Now, that's going to be the case this weekend with Doneiko Slaughter, a defensive back for the University of Arkansas. Also potential to beat the you-know-what out of Gerald Mincy at Kentucky. So we shall see. Now, let's get it started with the one, the only Cooper Mays. And do we have a clip of the Squirrel White clip on what he said yesterday, Caleb?
I don't have the clip, but I have the quote.
Okay, roll with the quote right now.
So Squirrel White was asked and basically said, I don't think anybody has talked to him. We're just going to see him when we get there. But it was very, shall we say, a tone of bitterness when he said it. Is that fair to say?
He had a smirk. The fact that they hadn't talked to him makes me think one thing. First,
Cooper Mays here. Hit like and subscribe.
All right. What down, Coop?
Coop here. First down.
All right. Is there extra motivation for the Vols when they go against former players on other teams?
I think there is, if those Vols did certain things to trigger them. And I guess the best example is, people are bringing it up on the message boards, of Gerald Mincy. Gerald Mincy didn't just transfer. Gerald Mincy transferred and then just started trashing the program after that. So I think there's extra motivation there. I think there may be an extra motivation for a Tyler Barron who was somewhat of a cancer on the defensive line last year, and then demanded more money, thought he was better, went elsewhere, and ended up going to Miami. I think in those instances, there is extra motivation. But again, I say this as someone who was never a player, but I do believe there's a camaraderie among all players across all different teams and certain types of friendships. And Dave, you know that. So I don't know if it's, I think more often than not, it's still, oh, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. How are things? How's life?
I would have thought so before that Squirrel White comment yesterday. And I'm going to bring up the C word, which you don't like, and that's culture. So I feel like if you bail, that these guys really don't like you, legitimately don't like you. Typically, I would have agreed with you before I heard Squirrel White yesterday. I think some of this is personal. What down is next, Coop?
Cooper Mays here. Second down.
All right, second down is this. Do the opposing players have extra motivation? Well, heck yeah. Doneiko Slaughter does not want to get beat by Squirrel White, and the two will line up against each other on Saturday because Doneiko Slaughter has slid into that nickel role for the Razorbacks, who I've been told are getting much healthier in their secondary. So in particular, right there, Slaughter doesn't want to get shown up by Squirrel White and embarrassed, which he very well could, because even though this secondary is healthier, I don't think they're that great at 100%.
Yes, I agree. I think Doneiko Slaughter would somewhat take it personally. But I think part of the reason he might take it personally is because Dave, I mean, he might have been forced out, or he might have been nudged out the door. And wouldn't you have an extra motivation if you were nudged out the door to come back and maybe prove your coach wrong that basically said you couldn't start? I mean, okay. You and I both know that.
Good.
You and I both know that Rick Clausen was very, very, very. He saved his one good game of his life for when he went back down to Baton Rouge and was put back in the second half.
You say nudged out the door, which I don't want to get too sidetracked, but that's what everybody says, every team, every program, when players leave. Oh, they didn't really want him. And we thought that was the case with Doneiko Slaughter. Have we been proven correct given what Tennessee has done in its secondary. Do you feel certain with Ricky Gibson and Jermod McCoy, and then whoever is playing at the nickelback, which could have been Doneiko Slaughter, so Boo Carter, Christian Harrison. Now, do you feel certain that Doneiko Slaughter was pushed out the door? Because I now, seeing what I have seen, believe that. There was like a 10% of me that questioned it before I've seen Tennessee's secondary play particular corner.
Yes, I believe he was pushed out the door. I'm going to take it a step further, and this may be topic for another day. The whole reason all the secondary, because Tennessee had a wave of 11 transfers in the secondary last year, and then they got all these guys who are better, most notably Jerron McCoy and Jacoby Thomas, both playing great football right now. Tennessee was tampering midseason last year. They already knew who, I'm just going to say this, Dave, up front, they knew which players they were going to land before they shoved other defensive backs out the door. They knew who was coming in, which they weren't supposed to. But they did.
Interesting. All right. What down, Coop?
Tennessee center Cooper Mays here. Third down.
Will it affect play at all? Yes or no, Caleb?
I think if it affects play, it affects it in a negative way. Honestly, not in a positive way. I think he gets
Tennessee or Arkansas.
Both. I think Squirrel White and Doneiko Slaughter, if they're both taking this personal, it will affect them both in a negative way. I think Squirrel White will be kind of pushing to try to get the ball to make a point, and I think Doneiko Slaughter may be going out of his way to lay a tackle that he shouldn't lay, whether there's not playing assignment football. Look, football's not basketball. We know the whole Last Dance, Michael Jordan. I took that personally. You can do that in basketball where you can demand the ball and then just take over a game. You can't really do that in football, though, right, Dave? You got to play assignment ball no matter where you are on the field. And so taking things personal, you can't just choose to all of a sudden become the focal point of a defense or an offense in that regard.
Well, no, you don't want to play out of character, but I think it's an advantage to know a player's weakness. So, for instance, in this particular game, I think it's Tennessee's advantage to know Doneiko Slaughter's weaknesses because they know him as well as Sam Pittman at Arkansas does. So I think they know what he does well and what he doesn't, and they'll be able to exploit that. So not from an emotional standpoint, just strictly an X's and O's standpoint, Caleb, I would argue that it will affect play on Saturday.
I mean, I could say it would affect play. I just don't think it'll affect it in a positive way. That's where I'm at with it.
You don't think if Josh Heupel knows that, hey, Doneiko Slaughter doesn't cover the dig route well, that they're going to run the dig route more often than Slaughter?
Oh, so from an yes, he knows that. No, that's a very good point. Okay. No, I can get with you on that. Okay. That's how it will affect play.
All right, let's get to fourth down. It's the best down, and it's represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? Banks & Jones, T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com.
SEC center Cooper Mays here. Fourth down.
Should either side feel any bitterness in this NIL age?
And I'm going to break with a significant portion of our viewers who have voted. But no, provided the split was amicable. And what I mean by that is, again, Gerald Mincy, you should feel all the bitterness in the world at Gerald Mincy. He has no business to.
Wait, Tennessee should feel that, not
yes.
Gerald Mincy should feel that.
Yes, Tennessee should feel it. Tennessee should feel it. Gerald Mincy has gone out of his way to talk about Tennessee in a way that I think is very unbecoming of a former player. But most of the time, no. And I say that because players have to think about their future. It's an age of NIL and the transfer portal. It's also an age where players are oftentimes nudged out. And I go back to, and everybody in Knoxville has hated me for this, but I don't think it was fair for Tennessee fans to despise Henry To'oTo'o the way they did when he transferred out of Tennessee. I mean, he committed to play in a system with Jeremy Pruitt as a linebacker that was a fit for him. Pruitt was fired. and you didn't know who was coming. It made sense for him to go to Alabama, where he could have been an immediate impact player. He's thinking about his future. I can't really blame him for that any more than I can blame Dave coming out of high school when Cade Mays decided to commit to Georgia. People can be mad about that, but that was the last year of Butch Jones when Tennessee was 4-8. How can you expect him, just because he's a legacy kid, to commit to Tennessee? This is no different than, I'm going to be honest, guys, it's no different than thinking Ole Miss is somehow justified in being mad at Peyton Manning for committing to Tennessee. They're not, and they never were. Okay, these players are, I'm sorry, but they're not, I don't want to sound like weirder. Fans are not your property. They get to go where they want to go.
What do you mean bitterness from a fan base? I'm talking about the team, Caleb.
I don't think the team should feel it either. I don't think the team should feel it. The team should know that first off, they know more than we do if players were shoved out the door.
Listen, I'm going to feel bitterness for if I'm a Tennessee player after all that I've put in for you. I'm going to feel bitterness. We've gone to war together. We've done all this. If you decide to go to another team for a couple of more dollars, I'm going to feel bitterness. If I'm Doneiko Slaughter and I was pushed out the door, I'm going to feel bitterness. There's no question in my mind, Caleb, that emotions are at play, that Doneiko Slaughter has had this game circled, and and Tennessee perhaps has it circled to play Kentucky because of the way Gerald Mincy walked out the door. So, no, these are young men. I think you're looking at this from a professional perspective, and they are getting paid. But to me, there's no question in my mind that there is going to be bitterness on one side or the other. Before we get to the groomers, Caleb, if you can address that, because I don't know of many splits that are amicable. I mean, I've unfortunately had a lot of friends who've gotten a divorce. Usually one side gets the short end of the stick.
Yes, splits are usually not amicable. That is very true. I get what you're saying.
I mean, Caleb, if I said, for instance, Peyton Manning has called me and said that he wants to co-host the Dave Hooker show. And I said, Caleb, you realize I have to do this. I mean, you would not be happy.
I would not be happy, but could I be bitter? Like, I mean, could I be mad at you?
I would be bitter if I were you.
Okay, what if I get that? And yes, I would hate it.
You've invested a lot.
I've invested a lot of time in this.
Yes.
But okay. Say you're roommates with Doneiko Slaughter, and Doneiko comes to you and say he chooses to leave, and he's like, "Look, man, I know who they're bringing in. I'm just never going to play, and I got to think about my future. And I'm not going to get a chance to play. And Arkansas is giving me a chance to play. I just can't sit. It's not good for me to sit here and ride the bench for 2 years when I'm never going to see the field."
Listen, I'm not disputing anything you're saying. I'm just telling you, they're human beings, and emotions are at play.
But we're saying, should they be? Should you feel bitter at Doneiko Slaughter if he chooses to do that?
No, but Doneiko Slaughter should feel bitter because he was forced out. Yes, you should certainly feel bitter now that you're talking. I mean, listen, that's the way the game's played now. In the old days, you'd hear me ripping Josh Heupel if he forced a guy out, because a scholarship used to be a year-to-year contract on the university side, but yet you were beholden to have to sit out a year if you transferred to the school for 5 years. So no, I would be very bitter if I was Doneiko Slaughter and I thought I was forced out the door because this guy named Ricky Gibson might be a little bit better than me. There's no question in my mind.